Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming today. This is our second installment in the Hispanic Google Network's series of talks called Perspectivas, where we try to provide mentors at scale to share their stories of success. Today, we're honored to have Jerry Porras from Stanford University, who will be talking to us about leadership and vision. So without further ado, Jerry Porras.
Well, the reason I am talking about leadership is because I think that out of the research that Jim Collins and I did for a book that's titled Built to Last, we uncovered what I think is a very, very fundamental difference in the leaders that built these incredibly enduringly great companies. And that difference, I think, is fundamental. And it's not a difference that's commonly perceived or viewed or thought about by most people who are talking about managing or leading or actually doing leading. Very briefly, what Built to Last was about, and this is really the source of these ideas, was a study that we did trying to understand what made what we were calling visionary companies different from any other company. And when we started the study, we didn't really have a very clear definition of what a visionary company was. We had these vague ideas and actually discovered what a visionary company was through the course of doing the study. But very briefly, a visionary company is a company that's had a significant impact on the world. It's widely admired by its peers. It has had a long track record of being successful on a variety of dimensions. And it's done this through multiple generations of leaders, multiple generations of products, and multiple generations of industry cycles. So using other terms, a company like this is an enduringly great company. And the two operational words are enduring, which means more than 10 years or 20 years. And in the life of someone at Google, 20 years is an eternity. But these companies that we studied have been great for, on average, 100 years. So these companies were, on average, founded in 1897. The earliest was founded in 1812. The youngest were founded in 1945. And they are companies that you've heard of. They're all big, successful companies today. They're companies like IBM, like Merck, like Hewlett-Packard. A list of 18 is the ones we wound up studying. And what we wanted to understand is, what did these companies do from the very beginning, when they were small and just starting out, the way Google was like 6 years ago? What did they do then? What did they continue doing as they grew to be sort of middle-sized companies, 20,000 people? It's probably more than middle-size. And what do they continue to do when they got to be huge companies with employee bases of 100,000 plus and the world focus? So we wanted to understand what were the continuous threads of the way they managed their companies from the very beginning to the present. And in order to understand that really well and understand it in a significant way, we came up with another group of companies that were comparison companies that had been in the same industry. They were paired comparisons, the same industry, found in the same dates, roughly the same products, still alive in 1990 when we were collecting the data. So we wanted to know, it's like having two horses running a race. And these two horses started the race 100 years ago, and they run for 100 years, and one horse just is spectacular, and the other horse is quite good, but pretty far behind. What does the spectacular horse do to run the race? How do they run it differently than this comparison horse, who, by the way, runs it much better than the average horse? So to give you an idea of what that might mean in terms of something more concrete, like the stock performance of these companies, We looked at the stock performance all the way back from 1926 to 1990, and I've updated it to 2000. And if you invest $1 in 3 portfolios, one's the market, one's the comparison companies, and one's the visionary companies, you find that the comparison companies outperform the market by a factor of about 4 to 1. The visionary companies outperform the market by a factor of 16 to 1. So these are really, really high-performing companies in the traditional ways that we look at performance, but also they're high-performing companies in a broader way in terms of they've really had an impact on the community, they've had an impact on the culture. Walt Disney is one of the companies we studied. Hey, that's had an impact on our culture. These companies really have really affected the world that they've operated in. So what do these companies do that makes them so spectacular that these other companies who are really the silver medal winners, if you will, what do the silver medal winners not do that the gold medal winners did do? And one of the things that we found was that the leadership looks different. The leadership of these companies look different. And specifically, when I'm talking about leadership, the leaders we studied in most depth were either the founders of the companies or the leaders who are responsible for transforming the companies into the great companies that they are today. Because they didn't all start out as great companies. 3M was a real loser. 3M went bankrupt, actually, in its first 5 years. And it wasn't until it was about 20 years old, but it continued to struggle along, that it started getting transformed into the 3M that we have today. So these companies didn't all start out as winners, and they were transformed by specific leaders. And what we wanted to understand is, how did those leaders behave that was different from the way the leaders of the comparison companies behaved? And so I'm summarizing those findings, and I'm weaving them in to what they might mean for you. All right. So let me start out by asking you a question, which I think you can sort of answer in your head. What's a great leader like? You know, think of your own stereotypical view of a great leader. And what are the words that you would use to describe this great leader? So think about that a minute. And here are words that often come up, and some research has shown that these are typical words that are used to describe what we consider, quote, great leaders. Now, there are many more words, but this is sort of a fairly representative base of words that get used to describe great leaders. Now, you look at that list, that's pretty powerful stuff. And one of the most powerful dimensions to that is the whole area of charisma. You've got to be charismatic to be a great leader. And I call these types of leaders charismatic visionary leaders. And this is what we think of. This is our view of what a great leader is all about. And if you're not this, you're not a great leader. If you don't have these characteristics, you probably can't be a great leader. Well, I don't know about you, but you know, when I get up in the morning and I'm brushing my teeth and I'm looking in the mirror, I don't see a charismatic visionary leader looking back at me. Now, maybe some of you do. I'd ask you to stand up, but I'm afraid you would. What do we see? Well, we might see some of these things or a little bit of these things, but we tend not to see these things. The typical person tends not to see these things. But these are the types of leaders that we admire and respect and aspire to be, this type of a person. Well, these types of people are the types of people that built some of the companies we studied. They were like this. And they built great organizations. They built great companies. What makes it interesting when you look at a long time frame and its 100+ year history, we found that these types of leaders built great organizations that were great while they were there. And then the question is, what happens when they're gone? Well, the reality was that these companies didn't die. They continued and survived just as long as the visionary companies that we were comparing them to. They didn't die. But in the long-term 100-year history of these comparison companies, we found that they were never as great as when that great leader was there. And they never had a second great leader. So it's like one per customer. You know, you get a great leader, maybe it's the founder, maybe it's an early transformational leader, and once that person is gone, you're probably not going to get another one like him. And they're all hymns. They were all hymns in the companies we studied. So you can create greatness, you can create a great organization, and it's great while you're there. And after you're gone, it isn't as great. Now, many people don't care. They say, hey, that's not my problem. You know, while I was there, I was doing my job, I was doing a great job, I was creating a great organization. After it's gone, that's somebody else's problem, and if they can't cut it, that's their fault. I did my duty, and I'm going on with my life someplace else. That's the type of leader that we tended to see in the comparison companies. In the companies that we said are these silver medal winners. Well, here's another view of leaders. Now, this isn't as common a view. But I suspect when you start looking at this list, you find more words that you can hook into and that you can say, hey, I'm a lot like that. I've got some of that. I think this relates more to the normal person, to you and me. These are what we're calling, by the way, because these were the characteristics of the leaders that either founded or transformed the built-to-last companies, the visionary companies. So we're calling these leaders built-to-last leaders. But these leaders created the companies that were enduringly great. And interestingly enough, they also built great organizations, and these great organizations endured long after they were gone. Big difference. Big difference. The difference is that it's not style that made the difference. Because although we found that these words described people differently, from the visionary, charismatic visionary leader to the built-to-last leader, they were quite different words. We found leaders in the built-to-last group who also were charismatic. Sam Walton was charismatic when he founded and built Walmart. He was a charismatic guy. So we found people like that. So we concluded that, look, it's not style. It's not what your style is. And a lot of literature and leadership talks about improving your style. You've got to create this style or that style. We concluded that it isn't style that's really the key difference. The key difference is, what does the leader pay attention to? What do you pay attention to? The charismatic visionary leaders paid attention to leading their companies. They built a company that revolved around them, their brilliance, their abilities, their technical knowledge, their fantastic ideas, their creativity. In contrast, what we saw in the leaders of the visionary companies was that these leaders focused on building the great organization. And when I say building, I mean building across all dimensions, building the people, building the systems, building the culture, building the structures, building the technology. That you focus on building into the company all the things the company needs to be great. That you don't sort of focus on yourself all of those abilities, and you provide all of that knowledge and all of that focus for the company, and it's great while you're there. So the built-to-last leaders focused on building great companies rather than leading them. Okay, so you say, well, this sounds okay, this sounds fine, but hey, how do I become a built-to-last leader? How do I become one of these leaders? That's a fundamental question. Well, I wish I had the magic potion. If so, I would be a lot richer than I already am. But I've got some ideas. I've got some ideas I'd like to share with you. And the first idea revolves around clarifying who you are and what you want. Okay? We all kind of go through life and we have a lot of needs, and so, yeah, I want a Porsche, I want to be able to vacation in France, I want, this, I want that. But those aren't the fundamental things that you want. If you really sit and reflect and ponder on what it is that you want and how that relates to who you are, you begin to get a first step built in becoming a great leader. And so clarifying who you are and what you want, I think, can be done in a lot of different ways, but let me suggest one way. And the way that I would suggest you do it is by creating what I call a personal vision. But look, here you are, you're in a company, and companies are in turbulent environments, and individuals are in turbulent environments. Things are changing around you all the time. You get forces coming at you from different directions. And I liken this to a little sailboat out in the ocean. But let's assume that you are a little sailboat out in the ocean. This is you. But also a part of you is that you're the captain of your own ship. This is you, the captain of your own ship. Here's your captain's hat. Okay, and you're out in this turbulent environment. And the waves are bashing you in one direction, and the wind is blowing in another direction, and the rain's coming down and beating you in another direction. And most importantly are that you really got to watch out for. So how the heck do you maneuver yourself around in this world, in this environment? How do you make sense of it? How do you create a successful life, a successful career? Well, this is where these ideas about a personal vision can be helpful to you. Okay, this is you. Oh, let's not forget your captain's hat. Okay, this is you. And I don't sail. I was born in El Paso, Texas, and all we had was sand dunes, so I'm speculating here, okay? But you're out in this ocean that's buffeting you around, and how do you get someplace? This is before GPS and all those fancy electronic stuff, but how did you get any place in those primitive days? Well, very often you had a star that was out in the distance that guided you. And from the purpose of our metaphor, this star represents your purpose. Your purpose. What is the reason that you're here? What is the sort of the fundamental contribution that you would like to make to the world? What will the world lose if you're not around making this contribution? Why do you exist? Now, for organizations, we ask that question, but we can also ask it at an individual level. And you can get very philosophical and all that, and you can kind of blue sky it. But if you get concrete about it and ask yourself, what's the contribution that I'd like to make to this world that I'm in? I think, in the sort of privacy of your own mind, you will come up with something that's meaningful to you, that's important to you, that you feel passionate about, that you feel is really a significant contribution that you'd like to make. And it doesn't have to be huge. You don't have to change the whole world. But most of us would like to do something that we think is important. That's purpose. That's the star out in the distance. That's what guides you forever until you die. Now, for those of you who sail, you know that you can't sail in a straight line. So you have to do other things. You have to tack back and forth. And so one way to sort of think about how do I limit my tacking is that the second thing that you need to establish for yourself is what are your core values? Now, core values are a small number of values that you hold really dear that you will not violate for anything. unless you make a mistake. Companies have core values. People have core values. So you're willing to lose money. You're willing to lose a relationship. You're willing to lose an opportunity. You're willing to lose all sorts of things rather than violate those values. So needless to say, there's a small number. Most of us don't have a long list of 30 core values. In companies, we found 5 on average. Not more than 7. Not less than 3. Just to give you an idea of the company. So for yourself, there's some small number of core values that are principles, that are ideas that you hold inviolate and that guide your behavior. So if you believe in respecting people, it guides your behavior. You respect people and you will not disrespect people. You'll not treat people badly, even though it may advance you in some way. Step 2, as a leader then, is for you to build an organization that's consistent with who you are and what you want. So if you're starting a brand new organization, or you're in an existing one and you want to build it, it needs to be consistent with who you are and what you want. If you build an organization that's very different, it's certainly not going to make it easy for you and probably won't be possible because you just can't be in this constant internal conflict. So build an organization that's consistent with who you are. It's consistent with your values. Build an organization that has a purpose, that fits your purpose, that somehow is on the path toward your purpose. And I would propose to you that these ideas would also make for enduring greatness in you as a person. And you don't have to be a larger-than-life, charismatic, walk-on-water, glow-in-the-dark, visionary leader. You can just be you if you focus on the right things. Okay.